Okay, good afternoon, everybody. Sorry about the slight delay. We had a little bit of a technical glitch. So this afternoon, we are very fortunate to have Tim, which is our strategy officer from Smart RPA. He has woke up very early from his part of the world to join us on this session here, and I'm really thankful and grateful for that. So today, Tim will help us to go over this interesting topic called overcoming operational challenges and barriers to scale in automation projects itself. So, Tim, please take us through the topic for today.
Thank you very much, John. Selamat pagi from Copenhagen in Denmark, and Selamat Potong to you in Kuala Lumpur. I should start off by saying that Kuala Lumpur was actually my home for 10 years, from not so recently. Which is a lovely place to be. So missing it, but I hear it's raining, so that part I don't miss. Here is just cold. So thank you very much for joining me. My name is Tim, and I work with a Danish company called Smart RPA, and we do some technology which is related to today's subject, which is overcoming operational challenges, which is usually the biggest barrier to scale. So I'm going to mix it a little bit with a little bit of on a high level with what happens with automation projects. And then at the end, I will dive down into some of some features, if you like, some technology components, which are usually kind of what we see as the missing piece in automation projects. It's what we call the automation that the automation providers forgot. So without further ado, John, if you could take the next slide, next one again, and I'll just give you a quick introduction to who we are. So, and the background is a little important. I know everybody says that, but in this case, that's actually true. The reason we're doing what we do today is because we have a very, very long history with automation. So in Denmark, Denmark is the #1 digitalized country in the world. So everything that has to do with government, private, corporate, and so on, everything is pretty much digitalized. And that was a strategy from at least the Danish government for a long time. That also meant that not only does Denmark produce a lot of pork and pigs and beer and Lego, we also produce quite good RPA technology. So when we started off, the entire team behind Smart RPA started off in about 2000 with building a technology which was called Kapow, which was always fun to run around with in the market. And Kapow was a web automation platform, screen scraping if you like, but it was a little bit more advanced. It got purchased in 2013 by Kofax, which is one of the bigger RPA platform providers, not as big as Blue Prism and UiPath and the likes of today. But we built actually an RPA engine, which is now obviously a bit further down the road. The point of that story is that when we were finished with incorporating into Kofax, we decided we weren't quite finished. We thought that there was quite a few gaps in what automation work was doing, and we decided to do something about it. So by and large, we are technical geeks, if you like, and we like to work with software and technology to help. It's a passion, and once you get bit by that automation bug, it kind of stays. So today our technology is used by approximately 80% of banks in the Nordics to control their RPA and intelligent automation projects, and a lot of other clients that are using it to optimize what they do. And we're now expanding, have partnerships with the big boys, if you like Blue Prism, UiPath, and so on. Next. John? Oh, thanks. Yeah, sorry, there's a bit of lag. Copenhagen is 10,000 kilometers away, but so the reason we got into this was that the challenge that we saw was Automation is great, especially at the beginning. It's very easy to find business cases. It's fairly simple to get started. The technology has become quite fairly simple to onboard. And so the journey of RPA starts off very well. You find the business cases, you get great ROI. It doesn't cost a lot to get started, fairly simple, everything is good. Once you move down that road, and it's not a set figure of you have 20 process or 50 or 100. But once you get down that road, it becomes a bit of a paradox, because the more you make of automations, the more difficult it actually becomes working with the concept, if you like, of automation. And the reason for that is that the business cases are not as big. You might start off in the financial area, and then you move into HR, then it becomes very departmentalized, that you have certain things, everything from copying things from an Excel, putting it into a PowerPoint, which is the very simple part. But also because the automations that you identify, they can be more complex. They're more end-to-end. That is where the real benefit is. This is where the market is shifting from what you would call RPA to intelligent automation. So it becomes more complex, longer processes. So then we were looking at, well, why is this the case? If it's so simple to get started with, surely you have the capacity to expand, to scale. Even with business cases, just means that you make the automations faster. That's not the case. So next slide, please. So what we did was we decided to make a technology to actually fix what we call operational challenges. It was an automation management system, which was to control, monitor, optimize, strengthen what we call automation estate. We call it an automation estate. I'll get back to that in further down the road here, which is that when you get to a certain size, you need to control quite a number of elements inside automations, not just the bot. So we built what we call Catalyst, which is an intelligent automation management platform, which was really to drive everything that was happening inside automation projects. We kind of jokingly call it SOS, which is stability, optimizing, and scale. So this technology was meant to really get automation projects streamlined in order to scale and fix what we would call operational challenges. Next, please. One more, I think. All right. So we all know COVID hit a couple of years ago, and my travel was at least very much limited, as I'm sure it was for everybody else. So in 2020, when the COVID hit, we decided let's do a little bit of analysis of what was actually the challenges going on. We built the system and so on. So we interviewed about 50 large corporations throughout Europe and asked them, what's the operational challenges that you have? I mean, let's get down to gritty business, if you like. Let's go down into the nitty-gritty details of this. And I could probably have added twice as many components here than is up here. And maybe you audience listening and watching, you might have seen some of this, or you might recognize some of these elements, but they're both big and small in nature. They can be very, very pragmatic issues that you're looking at, and it can be quite on a higher, more systemic level. But it is everything from SLA management to ROIs coming down, TCOs rising, and so on. I'll touch upon that in just a moment. But there are quite a number of these things. And next slide, please. If you combine all of these, you get this ball of operational complexity. Now, who bears this burden? Well, it's the center of excellence. Now, not everybody has a center of excellence. It might be federalized, it might be departmentalized, but all in all of these issues literally trickle down into everybody who's working with automations. The analyst gets frustrated because they don't have the right information. Developers are, and this is the big one, they are spending time on maintenance, support, level 1, level 2, SLA monitoring, these kind of things. Controllers are not getting the right information as well. They're not really sure how well things are operating. Managers, they have reports to do and they're not picking up the right reports and it doesn't look too good. Even process improvement people are not able to work on this because they are working with existing automations and not the new ones. So we half-heartedly joke a little bit about calling it the center of excellence becomes center of complexity, which is not a good thing because that is actually what is the barrier to scale. If you are constantly working with existing automations, error finding, fixing, reprogramming, redeveloping, you're not scaling. You're simply getting stuck in the same mud. So next slide, please. Yeah, and one more click, please. There you go. So this, that's too far, one back, if you might. So this operational complexity, it literally boils down to having higher costs, poor return of investment. There are a lot of success factors in RPA, and the satisfaction is usually on the stakeholders. If they're getting the right reports, they're getting the right automations, they are on time, and so on. So the negative side of this is that it actually does threaten the journey. Now, I was in Stockholm, which is our neighbor Sweden, a couple of weeks ago with Blue Prism. And it was quite interesting because they had two sessions. It was a breakout session as well, where they had two customers coming in. And the first one, they're both using Blue Prism. It doesn't matter. We work with a lot of different technologies. But the point was they had one that came in and said everything was working fantastic. They had 600 robots and processors and everything was working fine. The next one that came in, all the technology was working. They were doing fine. They had done their pilots and proof of concepts to the various managers. However, because of management buy-in, they were just not scaling. They were not able to get through this. And the problem was they couldn't show the business cases. And as they were scaling, it wasn't going. So they actually were caught in this operational complexity where management said, it's too expensive. We're not seeing the benefits. You're not providing the automations on time. You're hiring too many people in the center of excellence to fix things. We're just not sold on the technology. For years, people have said RPA is just a transition. You will use it for a couple of years, then you will integrate everything in the right way, the IT way, if you like. But they've been saying that for 15 years. So RPA does work, automations does work, but if you miss the mark and it becomes too complex, you're not going to scale on this. Of course, the other side of that coin is what we call automation excellence. Now, this is where you know that the automations are running on time. They are stable, they are working, business cases are being delivered quite fast. You have the metrics to prove it. You literally are having a good grasp on how you are managing the automations, because frankly, anybody can make a robot, whether it's in Power Automate or they get automation anywhere. It's pretty quick. I usually compare it to Excel. When we first got Excel, it was a big system. You could add a few cells. It was working, plus, minus, and all this. But if you ask somebody to go into doing pivot tables, no way. But that was the whole point of Excel. It was supposed to be big and grand. So you can get started with it, but if you're not controlling this, if you're not measuring this as you go along, you're going to lose focus. You're going to lose that edge. So, and especially in this time and place with the market going into what you would call intelligent automation, that becomes a problem because that is quite a complex automation. Vendors will say, yeah, we have everything on board, everything from IDP, OCR, natural language processing and all this, which is true, but you still need to grow into this. So the trick is here, of course, to getting to automation excellence. Next slide, please. And next again. The simple way of thinking of this is that once you're doing a level of automation, the more automation you have, the simple way of looking at this is you're reducing the amount of manual work. that comes in various stages. You are automatically monitoring, you have a schedule that works, you are controlling the environment, and last but not least, you have a predictability. You know that the robots will work, the automations will run, and they will work on time, and they are, they are able to work with the different applications and so on. So that's the simplistic way of looking at the less manual work you have in automations. And I mean, if you're working with automations, the whole idea is you have less manual work. But a lot of people have been looking at this from, well, we've done automations from the business side, but they haven't actually automated the automation. It's still very much a manual process of controlling the robots, monitoring them, fixing them, and all this. Next slide, please. So that's the simple way of thinking of this. Now, as the name kind of implies in Smart RPA, when we started off, we had a look at what works. If you took this and cooked it down and said, what are the basic principles of a successful automation estate? What are they? Simple to operate, that's number one. Minimal maintenance, which is probably the biggest one, because the biggest one is that maintenance we call it the maintenance trap. You're literally using too much maintenance and not focusing on new automations. It has to be autopiloted, meaning that the whole automation setup is actually working without too much human interference, but it has to be agile enough to have that human interference. And what I mean by that is you're seeing today a lot of people talking about citizen development, which personally I don't really believe in. I still think this needs to be managed from a central place. There's simply too much governance problems in citizen development. However, that doesn't mean that humans shouldn't be a part of it, and especially with managers or the people who are relying on the automations, they still need some form of interface, a window into the operations of automations, either through their own inputs, or they want to have statuses, or they need to change the schedule, they're behind, they have a board meeting, click on the automations, I need it done in 2 hours, things like this. So it has to be agile. Delivery is key. If you are not delivering the outcomes of automations on time or correctly, the whole faith in automation simply reduces. And a lot of automation centers are profit centers. They have to go into the business. They have to convince the business that automation is the way to go. They will show what they've done for HR and finance and so on, but maybe in sales, they haven't really seen the benefits yet. So it becomes like a profit center. So you have to prove that you can do the delivery. And the last one is transparency and insight. If you are not measuring how good these are, you're not able to basically move forward. So what we did was we took all these components, click please, and took those elements and put them into what we call Catalyst, which is orchestration capabilities, but intelligent orchestration capability. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. Management, which is managing the entire environment. Predictability, that's the big one. If you're not certain that things are working, or if you're looking at bottlenecks and you're not able to plan this accordingly, that's an issue. And optimization, meaning that the automations are running with the least amount of resources and as fast as possible and as easy to maintain. So these four kind of components is what encapsulates the smart properties of this. Next one, please. Now, again, it's a little simplified. I'm not going to, this is a heavy slide, but it kind of goes behind the scenes of what we've been working with. Now, a lot of people ask, well, why so many things? And I'll get to that in just a moment. But in honesty, in order to do this intelligent automation management system, you need to handle many different parts of that journey, whether it's stability, optimizing, or scale. You need to have insights. The whole issue, or the whole point, is to make this cost-effective automations. There's no point in doing automations if costs are through the roof. You need to have lean automation. It has to be fast to develop. The orchestration needs to be intelligent. We know that there are schedules inside the various RPA vendors. but they are a little rigid. It's, you know, run the robot at 2 o'clock, and if it doesn't work, run it again at 4 o'clock. That's not efficient. You have to have a lot of these, the COE jobs, the tasks, they have to be autopilot, because if you are going down automation road, the people that you hire, the people that are inside, they are bright people, and they want to build new automations. They want to build, you know, with process improvement. They don't want to be sitting and doing maintenance. And the last one is, and we're seeing that a lot right now, is the whole idea of audits and compliance, cybersecurity. That has to be a part of automations. If you're not handling that, governance will simply kill the project, because they're saying you're not doing this right. And I'll get back to that in just a moment. That's why we have a lot of banks, because when they were doing automations, governance was key. Next one, please. So this operational complexity, what actually brings this about? Well, a lot of people think, oh, it's just because we're not, you know, we're not building the robots properly, or we're not scheduling them properly, and they're not working, or whatever it is. Next one, please. So that operational complexity actually comes from, if you look at automation as a whole, there will be stakeholders, there is an environment, you have the technologies, RPA, intelligent automations, you will have new technologies, and you have governance. When you combine that, and you're not controlling all of these elements in your automation work, that's where the complexity comes in. So yes, the bots, digital workers must be controlled, but so must the rest of the automation estate. You have to have a finger on the pulse of what's going on in the environment. Is the SAP system down next week? Is ServiceNow not responding for whatever reasons? All of those issues has to be acquired for. Especially now, like I said, citizen development is becoming more of a thing, but so is management. Management will be looking at how well is this automation running. So there's a lot more calls into the center of excellence asking, you know, is it running? Has it run? When will it run? Did it run properly? What's missing? And so on. Meaning that there's actually quite a lot of work to be done with the people that you're doing automations for inside the business. The push for intelligent automation is a big one as well, because it's more complex technologies and the processes are much longer. End-to-end processes is really what you should be doing. But that puts a lot of pressure on making sure that all the components of that automation works, because if one doesn't work, the entire chain collapses. It's important to understand that RPA is still at the heart of this landscape. It's not suddenly you're going to be replacing RPA with something else, even though a lot of people will say, yeah, but intelligent automation, RPA is dead, it's intelligent automation. It still starts with RPA. So RPA is not going to go away, even though a lot of people might tell you over lunch and session breaks. So automation excellence is actually a bit of a symphony. You have to control a lot of things. Next slide, please. So just click this through. Yeah. So the automation estate that you're looking at is actually a little bit more complex. It's not just the robot. It is the environment with all. It could be physical desktops, it could be mainframes, it could be obviously cloud-based apps. You've got data lakes. You might need to work with business process management. It's quite extensive. At the same time, you've got different stakeholders, and these stakeholders can be inside the business, line of business directors and so on, business units, but it can also be outside, because automations is going out. So you need to be able to control how you work with systems outside your control. It's not just a question of, you know, if you're doing automation work with suppliers and others, you can't pick up the phone and call IT in a different company saying, oh, by the way, could you turn on your whatever SharePoint or whatever it is to start the automations. It doesn't work that way. Governance, like I said, is quite big. I can tell you there was in the UK about 6 months ago, there was a very large enterprise that decided that they weren't going to be that prudent on things like cybersecurity and so on, and got a walloping fine simply because they were things like GDPR and audits, and it didn't work, so they got a huge fine. So that is a part of it as well, which sometimes can be daunting for the managers, because they're not too keen on starting automation projects where at least these kind of fines come in. And last, intelligent automation. There's quite a number of technologies. I probably haven't included all of them, but all of this has to be managed, controlled, and optimized. Otherwise, you will have that operational complexity and you're not going to be able to scale. Next slide, please. Yeah, so next again, sorry. So intelligent automation management, coming back to, for example, a few weeks ago where I was with Blue Prism, it is actually becoming this next one. Like I said, it's the automation that automation forgot inside the control center. So this is a way to take a lot of the complexity out of bots, to take the logic out and control this in a proper way. We usually have this this analogy that with every system, it doesn't matter if it's email or if it's web development, whatever it is, when you get to a certain size, you're going to be taking on management capabilities in terms of software. And with RPA automations, that's no different. It's just a way of working a lot cleaner with automation. So obviously, when you get that in, you will start to get the ability to scale with more complex processes, more systems, more divisions. You will have optimal infrastructure, not having too many licenses where it's not needed. You will have stronger management support. All of these components is actually what you need to do the scale. So next slide, please. I'm going to go through this a little fast because I don't want really this to be kind of a product presentation, because that's not what we're about. But I want to show you some of these capabilities that it's done in a different way to give you some ideas. There are other systems out there, maybe not as deep as ours, we tend to believe. But I just want to take through some of these for the next 5 minutes, maybe 10. And then we'll open for Q&A. So John, if you can just, I'll do this and then you can take the, one back though. We have an execution engine which takes, again, the logic out of it. So in that process, you will have a need for a VDI or an app or a logging in credential and so on. All of that is taken out. That is what we call dependencies. So we do this whole prioritization, meaning that the system will automatically determine when to fire off a robot. It could be trigger based, so it doesn't run all the time. But that whole brain, that whole engine is in this execution part. That gives you an overview to say, well, I can't run an automation because I don't have a login to SAP. It could be that the Active Directory is down, so we don't have credentials. It could be the application isn't responding or a desktop has gone down. But all of this is automatically done. You can start making, next one, please. Work plans, that's quite important if you've got multiple parts around the world. You know, we had one client that was doing automation work in India, in US, and in Europe. And sometimes these schedules weren't working because of time zones. We brought it all in. It's just running automatically. Next one, please. Next. Right, so intelligent management on this level is very much on finding the abnormal behaviors, because automations, if they work, great, but some of the times they just don't work, and they could be for a number of reasons. First of all, you figure out there's an abnormal behavior, different alerts and notifications. You do desktop management, which is restarting systems, and frankly, I mean, 80% of problems usually, you know, some things haven't changed much in 20 years. I mean, in the old days, it was also customer support is like, well, have you tried restarting or rebooting your desktop or your server? And that usually took care of the problem. But if you're doing it manually and you've got 20 VDIs or whatever it may be, that can be a bit of an issue. So we do automatic, like logging in, restarting, and things like that. Authentication management, I'll get into that. System management, do we have resources? Do we have licenses available? And capacity management, which is literally planning around the different systems which you need to automate against. Next, please. Yeah, so we do desktop pools for managing that. Next one, which you can mix and match. So if you've got Blue Prism, you've got UiPath, or you've got Automation Anywhere, we can mix it. We do this whole login part, so we will find a credential, usually from an Active Directory, log into an available desktop, do the automation. So it's not hard-coded into the robot, it becomes a flexible system. Next one, please. So we also reduce the numbers. I mean, we see automation projects where, you know, one process equals one desktop. That is immensely inefficient. I mean, not to mention costly, because if you have a VDI, you need to install all the apps. And if you're installing, let's just say SAP, just that is an immense cost. So if you can reduce that, and you're just logging into the desktops which are available, and you can reduce that, that's you know, that's cost effectiveness. Next one, please. I mentioned a bit on banks that we have, which is very much on authentication and security management, because they have, especially in Denmark, the governance is extremely high. So what they wanted was a surefire way of not being able to make automations that ran amok, which meant, amongst other things, they needed proper authentication. Next one, please. So normally this is what happens. You have number of processes, they will have a shared account, they will then do something in an application. That whole, let's say, audit is actually invalid, because you are using the same credentials across multiple processes. So you've got no way of backtracking who actually instigated what. And when it comes to banks, that's an issue. Next one, please. So we actually split it in. So we say, well, yeah, you can have multiple processes, but you can only log in once. You can only log in with that one, or you have a different credential. Then you have a perfect audit session. We have one of our newest clients is actually the Danish tax authority. And just to put in mind, Denmark is probably the country with the highest tax bracket. So our average tax is about 60%. So yeah. We still have to pay for a number of things. We do get education, we do get you know, free hospitalization and all that, but it's high. The amount of money that goes through their automations is about 500 billion euro, give or take. So if you don't have that compliance, if you don't have all this, then you've got trouble. So they are actually using us to make sure that that whole governance that they have, which is extensive, and the audit is done. Anyway, moving on to next. This one you can go a little bit faster. We have this whole, if you don't know what's happening, you can't make, you know, changes. That's obviously. So we've got this whole dashboard with just go next, please, with everything from the executions to how the different processes are going. Next one, please. We can go into the individual tasks, so we can see, well, in a process, that process is slow because the logging into ServiceNow is taking too long, the VPN isn't working, or whatever it may be. We do ROI calculations on a granular level, because you're going to need that. You're going to need to prove to the business that the automations are saving FTEs time back to business, all this. But the big thing is also we do role-based. So this is where we have human in the loop, so that we can actually provide a customized dashboard to individual people that can have a look at on their automations. Have they been working? Have they not? So it's all configurable. You know, how much license are they using? Things like that. Next one, please. Complete alert system. If something goes wrong, you know, my robot is 7% slower. That's my benchmark. Send me, next one, please. Send me a Teams alert or an SMS. You can trigger all these different elements. So basically, you don't need to sit and look at this. And I've talked to quite a number of organizations where, you know, it's 10, 15 people just looking at whether automations are working. They cut that in half just on this. So next one, please. I'm going to talk very quickly on this. What a lot of people are doing, and I'm not saying it's right or wrong, we believe that it's not as efficient, is that when they do these automations, they build everything in one big box. You know, it's supposed to log in, it's supposed to scan, it's supposed to verify, and they have all these exceptions, and this robot becomes immensely huge, which means the licenses are just running. You don't really know. If something goes wrong, it says it went wrong, and then you have to dive into this black box, as we say. Our way of doing this is to split it up. The smaller components put together makes one big process, and it's a lot simpler to find the errors, to fix them very quickly. It's just more efficient. So you can combine this. And this one is actually a little bit more on intelligent automation, because intelligent automation will combine a lot of different technologies. So you might use Power Automate to look at the email. You might have some form of Python script to extract the text. It has to be looked up in SAP. UiPath needs to create some form of order in an ordering system. All of these components is different technologies. That is what intelligent automation is about. But if you can't combine them, then you have to build everything in a bot. And I'm sure the RPA vendors will be very happy, because it means more licenses, but it's not very efficient. So our technology kind of takes all of this, and you can build these orchestration workflows put together, so it makes a lot more sense. Next one, please. Okay, last one here from me, just a few more minutes. We do optimization across the board. So it could be overscheduling, which robots are just running idle, not doing anything, checking an email, it's not the most efficient. Can I log in? These overscheduling issues needs to put aside, because it's going to cost you too much. Next one, please. We have wastage runtimes. Again, what is it doing? Is it actually, one of the points here is to figure out which ones needs maintenance, which one needs to actually be worked on, and which ones do you need to throw out because they're just not working. They're never working for whatever reason. Next one, please. We do ROI leaks, which is, again, if the robots are not running, it means ROI leaks. Which departments are having problems, manual handling rate. Again, you need to find out that needle in the haystack, what's going on and what's not going on. Next one, please. Bottlenecks, that's a big thing. The other way around is that if you're trying to do automations to, for example, mainframe, if you do that on the day that the mainframe is down, or if you're putting 5 users when the mainframe can create 2, I guarantee you're going to have IT on the phone within about 30 seconds, because you need to be able to control these things. And again, what we're seeing is there's quite a number of companies that is doing robot as a service, automation as a service, and they need to be able to track, the different types of customers, how much license are they using, what's the ROI. They do outcome-based contracts, and you need to have quite a deep dive into this. Next one, please. Yeah, SLAs is a big one. If you don't meet the SLAs, usually that's not good. Technical backlog, that will drown any COE. Next one. Very quickly on this, we have Norlys, you will not know it, but it's one of the largest utility providers in Denmark. So they provide everything from electricity to heating. We don't use aircon, it's cold enough outside. We use heating, which is also very expensive, and they do internet, broadband services, and so on. They grew because they acquired about 100 different companies in the last 10 years. All with different IT systems, all with different RPA platforms, automations, and so on. This guy called Jens, he said, never mind that we've saved 80% in operations and all this, that's all good. What is actually quite good for me is that because all of this is automated, all the automations are running and so on, it's actually saved my marriage, because he was charged with having automations run before Monday 6 a.m., which meant that he had to be monitoring and fixing robots during the weekend, which his wife was not exactly too pleased about. So he said, it's great, I can show management we've saved all this money, but wifey is happy. So we take that as a success as well. Next one, please. Generally, I'm not going to go into this, but generally with technology like this, you're going to halve the effort, you're going to double the capacity. And if you put that together, that's where you will do low total cost of ownership, higher IRI, more success, happier stakeholders, and so on. It also means development goes a little faster. We do this with, just to give you an idea of how fast this goes, it's literally within a day we find out how do we solve this. Is it monitoring? Is it orchestration? Is it intelligent automation, end-to-end processing? That gets done quickly. Within about 4 weeks, we've analyzed where the issues are, and after that, you get automation excellence. So that's kind of how we work. So yeah, I've think we've got about 5 minutes left for Q&A. Terima kasih for listening. I hope you got something out of it, and I'll open it to the floor with John.
Yes, thanks, Tim, for sharing that. I didn't realize that there were so many things that you need to actually watch out for. I mean, I think I've learned a great framework of understanding now. There are so many things that we need to track. I think that makes sense now with the whole thing that you put together. Right, we've got actually 2 questions that are posted, and let me just project the question.
Sure.
Right. So the first one here, it says that how can we avoid those pitfalls that you mentioned, right? So we can have a smooth journey on automation.
Right. So I think it depends, of course, on at what level you are at. If you are just getting started with automation, I mean, you find the business cases that make sense. And there are tons of information out there who started what. Usually it starts in finance, so get started with that. I would say our experience is when you get to about 30, 40 processes, that's where the management becomes a little bit difficult. So keep an eye out for it. I mean, obviously start off well, but have the success, show the success, and then grow with that. The pitfalls, I would put it this way: you would probably, when you're finding the vendor that you need to work with, whether it's RPA or consultancy or whatever, raise it. I mean, mention that you do know that the maintenance side. I mean, the pitfall comes from an operational side. It's not creating the automation that can be done by anyone, but the operation side. So just have an eye out on it. If you are starting to hire more and more people to fix robots, that's where you need to raise the flag and say, hang on a minute, there has to be a better way of doing it.
Better way, right? Yeah. Okay. I think that's very insightful. I think that's something that we probably have not thought about. I mean, that's a very, very good advice in that sense. Look, better be.
I think it's where the maturity lies. Like, for example, in Europe, or especially in the Nordics, RPA started quite early and expanded very quickly. Asia is becoming there, and it's to do with, like, for example, if and there's no offense to our Indian friends, but they were doing a lot of the work that automation was supposed to be doing. So automation didn't really pick up, at least not that much in Asia. But it's coming now, because it's not just a question of how to get things done faster or not saving, FTEs in that sense, but having correct data, correct information, governance, make sure things are working right.
Yeah. Thanks for that question, Tim. I do have another question here just before we wrap up. Let me just put it up for everybody. So the question says, what do you see as a trend for the RPA in the near and the distant future? I mean, probably just talk a little bit from your experience. What are you seeing that's coming up next? Or
that's a great question. Because, like I said, for 15 years, people were saying, "Oh, RPA will die out. It's gonna, you're gonna be using RPA for 3-4 years, and that's it.
Right.
You're gonna integrate properly in how IT wants it." IT was always looking at RPA as a kind of Mickey Mouse way of doing it, but no offense, but after 15 years, it's still around.
It's still around.
So what happens now is, I think the word RPA is probably going to get dropped. I think it's more a question of automation, and the reason for that is that you're calling it a robot process automation, but the next step is it's automation. Use the technologies that make sense. If you've got a guy who's really, really good at coding, like Python, use what he can use. It's not, and many vendors will now say, no, you need to go into hyper automation and intelligent automation, which is true from the point of view that now the technology has become so sound, you can actually mix and match the different technologies. You couldn't really before. RPA was, if you talk to analysts, they will say, well, RPA is stupid. Robots are stupid. They will only, it's very linearly. You have to make the rules and the guidelines. And if anything happens outside of them, it breaks, which is true. Intelligent automation is doing RPA, obviously, in a more intelligent way, but it's incorporating more technology. So I think the word RPA will kind of fizzle out, but automation, intelligent automations will be there. It's just a question of using more technologies than just having a UiPath or Automation Anywhere license in doing an automation. It's going to be more complex.
Yep. So I think the fit for purpose concept will definitely come in eventually for us to really, like you said, mash up those technology and what makes sense for the business that will solve their pain point. I think that's key, especially those example you raised on the governance side, right, in Denmark that you're seeing, right? I'm sure eventually we will get to that same stage as well. I think it's just a matter of time. I think that's very, very helpful with our audience today as well. All right.
I'd like to throw just one last thing. I know it's the end of the day and so on, but I think what you're seeing is, for example, Microsoft is now coming into the market with Power Automate. I mean, they've had it for a while. It makes total sense. 365, you should do the automations there. The users themselves can say, take stuff from my Excel, put it in a PowerPoint, a nice slides, all these things. That's going to come now, which is a simpler way of doing it. So you will have these kind of citizen development automation parts. But when it comes to mission critical applications, I don't think you're going to get around that. I mean, you will still need things like UiPath, Blue Prism, and things like that, and people who know how a process actually works.
Yeah, especially the citizens developers, right? I think one of the key points that I've been stressing to a lot of our customers and even friends that I'm sharing about it, right? I keep saying that, guys, you need to have a governance model around that. Because, I mean, if you let people loose and developing, I think the initial stage is great, but you come to a complexity whereby, hang on, how do I even manage this, especially when you have PDPA or GDPR being applied, right? You start to say, hang on, am I going to get myself into trouble of not being compliant?
But imagine if you have 50 employees who decides to do automation work and starts hammering on mainframe or SAP system.
That's going to be very scary.
that's not good. It's not going to be IT calling. It's going to be legal.
Correct. So especially the risk management team is going to say, "Hey, John, what's happening?
They're going to be busy.
So Anyway, good sharing, team. Like I said, I will hope to have you again in our next session. Again, thank you so much for sharing.
My pleasure. Thank you, everyone, for watching. I hope it was worth your time. Appreciate it.
It was, Sam. Thank you, team. We'll hope to see you again. Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Terima kasih.
Terima kasih banyak.